Good morning, guys. How you doing? This is Mike McCormick with Advanced Criminology here in Owings Mills, Maryland. Today is January 24th, 2018. It's about 10:45 this morning. And today's discussion will be, if you haven't been keeping up, the trial of the two gun squad officers. There was 8 originally charged. 6 had pled guilty already. And there are 2 that decided to take their cases to trial. And so the question that we asked today is, why the jury will find both of those officers guilty as charged. It's obvious to me why the first 6 officers took a plea bargain. What, however, is not clear to me is why the remaining 2 officers would not take a plea bargain and roll the dice to decide to go to trial. Yesterday, the case was held. Today, the case was postponed till tomorrow on Thursday. I want to thank you guys. I got some good feedback so far in reference to the. I went out yesterday and did some things with the videos on the street of different shootings that took place last week, the kind of locations. I do this for a reason. Number one, most folks who live in Baltimore kind of know all the places that I talk about. There are many people that have never been to Baltimore. Some probably will never come. And there are those who will come. Then there are those folks who live around the world who are very popular on the channel, who comment, who are subscribers as well, who really want to know, what do these places look like? And as you know, most times when we see a videotape of a nighttime shooting, either through an officer's body cam or through a surveillance video, generally speaking, those videos are not clear at all. We kind of get silhouette stuff. Sometimes we get clear stuff. So the idea is to be able to bring you to show descriptively all the things that those cameras do not show at nighttime. And I think that it works well so far because people are able to see exactly, okay, this is what the place looks like during the day. And then look how violent it can turn at night. So it's something that I decided to do. We got some good feedback on it. And as I can get out and do these things, I will. So let's pick it up, today's discussion. Again, why the jury will find the last 2 officers guilty. Now, most times, you go to court situation, you have an opportunity to plead guilty or not guilty when you walk into a court. That's afforded to everybody in this country. However, preliminarily, there are going to be many things that are going on behind the scenes if, in fact, the case against you is a good case and the prosecution can convince a jury or a judge and make every element of a charge stick, that in all likelihood you will be found guilty if you go to trial. Generally speaking, plea bargains are so that you can get a better deal in terms of how much time that you're going to receive in the case. And the penalty generally is a penalty if you take the case to trial. You could receive the maximum on that particular charge. And that's the risk that you run when you decide to go to a jury trial, that you may in fact get found guilty and that you may in fact be looking at a maximum term on a sentence, typically where you have been given the opportunity to take a lesser plea. And so this is the case where the officers find themselves. And so I'm just interested to find out and learn more about the decision-making process with the defense legal team. Now, in most cases, most public defenders, if you have a public defender or a private attorney, will look at that case and they will tell you whether or not they think the state has a good case or the federal government has a good case against you. The numbers are not in your favor in federal government corruption charges, particularly when there are multiple defendants, simply because those defendants have been given deals early on in the case. And if you were offered a deal and you didn't take it, part of the deal that they gave the first group of people tied to their deal will certainly be time lessened. That will be a consideration by the court when doing sentencing. And the other issue is whether or not those defendants, co-defendants of yours, will end up testifying against you should you take your case to trial. And this is where these guys find themselves, these two officers, where now, literally, you can have other officers who are co-defendants in this case come forward and kind of, spill the beans on everything that you guys were up to during the federal government's investigation. And this is pretty much is what's happening now. I just don't understand the reasoning or the rationalization behind the whole thing. One of the defense attorneys came out yesterday in the news and said that pretty much the only thing that his client is guilty of is theft. Well, the problem is, you didn't walk in Walmart and take a $10 item, out the store and you got caught. This is not that kind of theft. This is a conspiracy. It's a whole different ball game, and it's a government conspiracy amongst other defendants. And so to trivialize his client's part in this crime, to say that the only thing he should be guilty of is theft, should not. It probably won't play well in front of the jury, particularly if they get to hear what the other officers contribute to this particular case. So I wanted to discuss that, and I wanted you to also know that these two particular officers, Officer Hersl and Officer Taylor, were part of this gun squad task force of the total 8, and these officers are not only are they charged with federal crimes, but these officers also would be charged with departmental violations in terms of internal investigation division violations as well. I counted, at least when I ran through all the policies that the Baltimore Police Department has in place, I counted probably about 20 policies that have been violated with these particular officers in terms of the code of conduct and ethics and things of that nature, as well as what they were supposed to do with the money that they had taken from suspects on the street, what they were supposed to do in terms of filing for legitimate overtime through the proper channels. It goes on and on and on. So even if an officer walked away from all of these charges of not guilty, they still would be fired based upon all the other evidence, the departmental policies that were broken. And so it's a sad case, but unfortunately this is we have to deal with corruption in police departments, and the RICO charge is for organized crime. That's what it's for. The state doesn't have a identical type of charge, so that's why the feds step in and pursue a RICO charge. And this is where we find ourselves, or the officers find themselves today. You guys know, you watch television, you listen to the news, there's always been that thing of the code of silence, the blue wall of silence that is typically involved in policing, where the officers don't speak up against one another, no matter what, so to speak. And that's fine in theory. It works in theory. When it changes is when people get indicted. So for all the camaraderie that these officers had and all the enjoyments of the fruits of their illegal labor during this investigation, it now comes down to, were you really that close of friends? Were you really that close of co-workers? Because as it turns out now, these are the same people who you were in cahoots with during this particular time frame period. And now, you're facing extended terms of incarceration with people who you thought would remain silent, and they have not. And I hope this is a lesson, too, for the young officers that are coming on board in the police department, that's any police department, that, do your job. If you do your 8 hours and do what you're supposed to do and go home after 8 hours, that's what you're being paid to do. You're not getting paid to do anything other than enforce the law out on the streets and community service, protect the public. It's kind of basic stuff. And when you get sidetracked into some of the ongoing things that that are going on that are wrong, this is where you'll end up finding yourself on the other side of the law. And it's just not worth it for the fixed $50,000 or $60,000 salary that you're making. So yeah, I just want to share that. Just just take it from me and my past experiences that you know that's a road that you certainly don't you find yourself in or going down that road. So the racketeering and corruption charge, it's at this point, having looked at how the indictment read and how it reads, particularly pertaining to Detective Hersl and Taylor. Detective Hersl is named more in the indictment in terms of his activity, his actions, and his contribution to these charges as they stand now. So he's definitely a primary player as I read the indictment. Detective Taylor, although you don't see his name mentioned as much, the problem is that he's caught up in a web. And the way the RICO charge reads typically, I'll give you an example, would be if you were involved in a drug operation and the only thing that you did was point people down the street to a house, and that's all the government saw that you did. You never distributed narcotics, you never packaged narcotics, you never shot anybody, but the only thing you did when the potential sale approached you is that you pointed down the street. Well, you are now involved in that conspiracy. And I think that's kind of where Detective Taylor finds himself. His argument might be, he wasn't the person that was going in home stealing stuff. He wasn't the person, that was signing off on overtime. This is what will probably be his defense. The only problem with that is that he received the benefits and the proceeds of illegal activity by the other officers who were involved in the conspiracy, and so therefore he's tied up in that conspiracy, and so that's the way it probably should have been explained to him. Maybe he didn't. Maybe his attorney didn't explain it that way, but he is truly involved in that web of conspiracy. No matter how important or how unimportant his role was, he is still involved in that conspiracy, and he still can face up to 20 years on that charge, and that's what that charge carries. Under Title 18, I have it right here in front of me, 18 U.S.C. 1962, and they're charged with that. Section D, Section C of that RICO conspiracy charge. So it definitely reads that he certainly can be found guilty. I don't think you're going to be able to fool a jury in this particular case. I don't care who your lawyer is. I think that the fact that you have other officers coming forward to testify against you is in and of itself is something that will certainly hurt the case to the point that, why wouldn't these officers be believed? They're all coming forth and testifying their part, of course, and they're going to testify to what your part is. Why wouldn't the jury believe the government's case? If the government lays their case out the way it has been laid out in this indictment here, yeah, you're going to be found guilty without a doubt. The only problem is now where you were once given an opportunity, and that's dealing both detectives, Hersl and Taylor, where you've been given an opportunity to plead guilty, and for some reason or other you decided that you didn't want to go that route, and now you face the maximum term of 20 years in prison for this. I will tell you that Detective Hersl, I have talked to several officers that have worked with that detective over the past 10 years or so, and they all pretty much told me the same thing, that he should have been indicted a long time ago. Some of these officers knew about his behavior in terms of stealing. And that's one thing that we all need to understand about this case. Although this indictment ran roughly for 15 months, these officers had a propensity towards stealing and theft and lying and cheating. It was already there. The opportunity just presented itself when they got into this gun squad. And this is known because, again, there were several people that I talked to who said that they knew a couple of these officers were doing what they call street rips. Basically, you roll up on a street corner in Baltimore City, and whoever runs, you take off and catch them. If they got money on them, you take it. If they don't run and they have money on it and they can't account for how they have and why they have a certain amount of money on them, you take it. And you take it and you don't get names, numbers, or anything like that, so there's nothing traceable to you as an officer when you pull them up on the street. And so, that's what was going on. and Detective Ward, who was one of the main co-conspirators in this case, is a detective who, in fact, from my information from several sources, again, and my sources are good sources, because my sources are coming straight from the police department, sheriff's department. Those are my sources within those departments who have given me certain information about behavior of a couple of these gun task force officers before they were even allowed to get into the gun task force. And I've also talked about that in length in some of my discussions to some of the folks who comment that in future there needs to be a test and a different type of qualification for certain officers to enter into any vice unit, and whether that vice unit is prostitution, gambling, or drugs, simply because the temptation is out there. And if you are a person who can be easily manipulated, or you're a person who has a propensity towards stealing and lying and cheating, that will be a perfect place for you to end up getting caught and end up getting indicted. Those types of places. If you look at the national studies that deal with officer misconduct, I will tell you well over 90% of those studies indicate that most of the racketeering and corruption charges are going to come from officers who work in these specialized units, and they change the names every 2 years, but they're the same units. I don't care what the names are. They're the same units doing the same thing. That is typically where you're going to find corruption in those units. And that's why those units need to be closely monitored, and there has to be no tolerance in those units as well. So people can be either transferred out of those units or brought up on charges, as soon as possible. Because again, it's an integrity issue. So I just thought I'd mention those types of things. Let's see. Now, Officer Hersl is accused of taking approximately, in overtime, $66,602.98. Officer Taylor is accused of stealing, in overtime, $56,246.35. That's what they're accused of. That's what's in the indictment before me as I look down here on this page. So that's a lot of money in overtime. That's a lot of stealing. Now, because it was done through a wire transfer, which most government agencies now are paid through banks through wire transfers that come through the main paying accounting firm that pays out these checks every 2 weeks. Once you submit false documents saying that you worked this particular time and we find that time's not true, well, it's a wire fraud. And so wire fraud is covered under the RICO racketeering corruption charge, federal guidelines. It's covered. And so you can't even argue. You can't even argue how you receive these thousands of dollars above and beyond your normal salary. Again, I don't know how you win a case like that in a federal court. I really don't know. But we'll see. Let's see. Officer Hersl. I bring this guy's name up because, again, he's an 18-year veteran. Long time to be in the police department, 18 years. So you can imagine some of the nonsense that this guy was doing, prior to even getting caught. But a couple things come to mind is that he had a couple of settlements against him dealing with brutality charges. So right there's a red flag for this guy even got into this unit. So we sometimes talk about the officer's behavior, but we really need to start focusing on supervision. We really need to start focusing on accountability in the higher ups of lieutenants, captains, and majors who run these operations within the police department. These particular guys are kind of getting by and not being held on the carpet. I can tell you that right now, because you don't hear anything in the news about these people. That tells you right there that these guys are being shielded for some reason, and we don't know. But there needs to be, with the new commissioner, needs to take a look at internally where the breakdown is. And there's a breakdown anytime you have several officers that can do the damage that these officers did in the 15-month period. You know, suppose that unit was bigger than eight men. Suppose that unit was comprised of 40 men around the city. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the kinds of things that could have happened and would have happened? And so, you know, you have to have what they call, I was in the military, and it was called a span of control. You know, how many people can be supervised by one given individual? And so it works on the police department because the police department's a semi-military organization. You know, I just wish that some of the punishments were the same on the police department as the military, because you wouldn't have half this misconduct and nonsense going on. You know, I can remember being in the military, and if you didn't get your hair cut 2 weeks in a row and you were told to get a haircut, you know, you faced a $150 fine. You know, you could face imprisonment for not getting a haircut. 30 days in a break for not getting a haircut. Something simple as that. Okay, so, you know, if you want to be and act like a military organization, you know, how about just using the Uniform Military Code of Justice to use as a guideline for misbehavior, misconduct in the police department? I venture to say they wouldn't like it. So, you know, I'm going to rest it here. I want to thank you guys for always supporting the channel. Keep in mind that we'll be doing some other things this week. I put a lot of videos on this week in reference to, you know, crime and punishment in the city. And we'll be taking a look at some other things. I want to focus back on the issue with the education department in the state of Maryland. There's some serious things going on here, and there seems to be no accountability, you know, whatsoever. Nobody wants to stand up and say I was wrong and say I was wrong. You know, people have to be fired. Sometimes the message has to be sent throughout an organization that there is a level of tolerance that is accepted and unaccepted, and at some point, heads have to roll. And I don't care who they are; they have to roll. Once you take a government position, you have to understand that a lot of these positions that you take, decisions that you make, you're going to have to live and die with, or decisions that you don't make. And so we'll kind of see how that plays out. I need to get some more information in reference to the Dr. Dance, who's former superintendent in Baltimore County. I followed a little bit of his career, but not a whole lot, to find out, you know, why, you know, he did what he did, particularly earn the salary that he was earning in Baltimore County. So with that, I'm done. Look forward to seeing you guys next time. If you have any comments, please make them. I'm Mike McCormick here, Advanced Criminology here in Owings.